Dougie.
Sam.
Arsenal have a new sporting director. His name is Andrea Berta, and he is very interesting. Let's talk about him, his task, and also open up a wider discussion about how important the role of sporting director is in 2025.
Arsenal have announced Andrea Berta as their new sporting director. He succeeds Edu, who left last November.
What I know of Andrea Berta, he's got the best CV of anyone out there to replace Edu and take Arsenal through into the summer window and beyond.
His appointment at Arsenal, I think, stands out as a little bit of a marker, actually. I think it's a bit of a statement type of appointment from the club, and it's encouraging that somebody of Berta's calibre is looking at Arsenal as his next step.
Arsenal fans don't want to just be competing now, they want to be winning trophies. And it will be the role of Andrea Berta to oversee all of that.
Yes, hello everybody, welcome to another episode of The Truth. I am your host, Sam Tighe, wearing a brand new pair of socks for today. They feel oh so good. Dougie, how are you?
No new socks, but I am well, thank you. I'm well. I'm been disappointed with myself about the lack of live football I've been to this season. Had to work a lot more weekends, etc. But I'm going to the Hawthorns for the first time this Saturday to watch West Brom versus Sunderland, 12:30 kickoff. It's bound to be 1-1, but I am there and I'm excited.
It's a terrible stadium.
It's very high.
I've been, it's rubbish. Voice of God producer Jack Collins is also here, is also present. I guess if you're the voice of God, you are technically ever present.
Omnipresent, some would say.
Yes. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, mate. My voice has recovered from a trip to Malaga. Happy birthday. I'm sorry I missed it, which was earlier in the week.
It was.
I have been to the Hawthorns and I quite like it. Highest ground above sea level in the UK.
Why did you like it?
They sing The Lord's My Shepherd, which I think is wicked.
Okay.
Do Villa have a rivalry with West Brom? Like, I know they do, but is it strong?
Yes, but that's not why I don't like it.
Right.
So I actually went as a technically as a QPR away fan.
Wow.
During the Jose Bossingua era. And,
that's niche.
And you have to drive through, like, to get to into the away stand and to park up, you kind of have to drive through it feels like a warehouse or something. It's really bizarre. It's like you think you're in like the storehouse for IKEA, and then suddenly you can see a pitch.
Okay.
And it just doesn't make any sense. And you know what? It just threw me off.
Well, I'm getting the train with no doubt. Well, with two mates, but the Sunderland lads as well, and I expect spirits to be high.
There is a McDonald's just outside it, like.
So that's handy afterwards.
Swings and roundabouts.
That's a positive. Yeah. That is a positive. Anyway, we are not here to talk about West Brom or the Hawthorns or McDonald's. We're talking about Andrea Berta, newly appointed sporting director at Arsenal, taking over from Edu, whose departure was finalised in about November or so. So we're at the start of April here. It's quite a big lag between the two directors sort of leaving and appointing here, and it meant that Arsenal didn't actually have a sporting director during the January transfer window, which is possibly part of the reason why they didn't go and buy that striker, because an already very difficult decision, very difficult market is made all the harder by not having the guy that pulls the strings on these deals. So Berta actually left Atletico in January, which means I guess he was technically around and available, but Arsenal have taken a further 2 months to get this done, which suggests they've really done their homework, they're really happy with him, and they think he's the absolute perfect guy for this role. So, Dougie, who have they hired?
Well, first of all, it was maybe important to note that Jason Ato was Edu's deputy, and he took over for the January transfer window, which finished with that kind of Ollie Watkins debacle, really, I think it's fair to say. Jason Ato and Berta were the two main candidates for this role, but they did also consider Thomas Rosicky, who is sporting director at Sparta Prague, which I found pretty cool. They've done pretty well in European competition for a club of their size over the last couple of years. They also considered Roberto Olabe, I think that's how you pronounce it, from Real Sociedad. Dan Ashworth, of course, formerly of Man United and the FA and West Brom. West Brom coming up again. And Thiago Skuru from Monaco. But in terms of Berta, he's got quite an interesting backstory. So he didn't actually get involved in football until his late 20s. Prior to then, he'd been a banker. Don't know what it is about Italian bankers then getting into football, but Sarri did the same thing, didn't he?
Yeah, and it was the guy that was the sporting director at Southampton who hired Pochettino. What was his name?
That is not coming to me.
It will come to me. Carry on. But he was also, I think, an Italian banker.
Well, yeah. So Berta went from banker in Brescia, which is in northern Italy near Milan, and then he joined a amateur football club. That amateur football club's owner then moved to Parma in 2007, and they took Berta with him. He then went to Genoa in 2009, and from articles that I read, Italian middling clubs, let's call them, they conduct a lot of business. There's a lot of wheeling and dealing.
Yeah.
So in 4 years in Italy, Berta oversaw 250 deals, transfers and loans. So he's got a lot of experience from his time in Italy. At Genoa, he oversaw the creation of a side that finished 9th and 10th in his first 2 seasons there. They've only finished in the top 10 once in the 12 seasons since his departure, and they've been relegated in that time too. So there was some notable success stories at Genoa. He brought in Miguel Veloso from Sporting CP, Rafinha, do you remember him, from Schalke, Kevin Prince Boateng. He also got a big profit on Stefan El Shaarawy as well, who's a bit of a cult hero in Serie A. But he joins Atleti in 2013, and this is where the bulk of his reputation is formed, because Simeone had joined the club in December 2011, and it's fair to say that the two of them, although Simeone has understandably got a lot more credit, have overseen the golden period of Atleti's history, or at least their 21st century history. So before his arrival, they hadn't won the league since 1996. They'd finished in the bottom half 5 times and been relegated in the years since 1996 to 2013. And during his time at the club, they won 2 league titles in 2013-14, one in 2020-2021, reached 2 Champions League finals, unfortunately both the times losing to their dearest rivals, or their fiercest rivals, I should say. There's nothing dear about that relationship.'Real Madrid, won a Copa del Rey and the Europa League.
They did all right.
They did okay.
Yeah, they did all right.
And some of the stuff, and I think this is quite key when we'll talk about this throughout the podcast, but you can kind of paint any sporting director as a genius or an idiot on the basis, particularly when they've been in the club for that long.
Yeah.
There are some notable hits, there are some notable misses.
We'll go into them for sure.
We'll go into them for sure. But this is a guy who is known, he's not actually that well known, to be honest, as opposed to some sporting directors like Dan Ashworth or Monchi, etc. But he's not a shrinking violet. I mean, some Arsenal fans have been delighted with the fact that this is a guy that pushed a City staff member in the face during a quarter-final clash in the Champions League in 2022. And he's never had the same resources as Arsenal have. So since 2013-14, Atleti's net spend has been £125 million. Arsenal's has been £820 million. So we'll get into the details of what business he's conducted, but he's arrived at Arsenal at a crucial time and with a much, much bigger budget than he had at Atleti.
The Italian banker turned sporting director I was trying to think of, Nicola Cortese, who was very outspoken and a bit of a hardline guy. So I'm surprised I forgot, but it was a while ago. Pochettino at Southampton genuinely was like a decade ago or more. So yeah, just a couple more things on Berta. Won the Golden Globe for being the best sporting director in the world in 2019. I found in my research. I don't know what that is. Never heard of that.
Huge, prestigious prize.
Yeah,
apparently his acceptance speech was 55 seconds, which I enjoy. So he's not one for the spotlight. Okay,
nice. And I saw regular descriptions of him as mysterious and always wears sunglasses. That is my scouting report.
Never let them know what you're thinking.
Yes, indeed. Apparently he is very present, though, often in the dressing room after the game and always in the stands and obviously always forging connections and doing deals. And as you've outlined, like he's got a pretty rich history of handling a lot of deals. The Genoa stuff aside, even the Atletico stuff, which we'll come on to now, you look at through the last sort of 10 years of transfers, it's 10 in, 10 out every single season, you know, of various quality and prestige, these players, but probably 5 in and 5 out on a first team level, and then a few more adding in on the youth level or whatever. So there's a lot of players coming in and out here. The guy wheels and the guy deals. Probably the most impressive part of it, apart from the trophies that Atletico have won with his help, is the fact that he managed a generational shift of Atletico Madrid away from, well, first of all, they harnessed Diego Godin, they harnessed Juan Fran, Gabi, Felipe Luis, these guys who were the heart and soul of the club. And obviously they all grew old and had to go. And it's very hard to replace one club legend, let alone 4 to 6, which is what Berta was given the task of doing over a few years. And, you know, he's had some real hits, but more than anything, he's managed to keep a club stably in the top 4 the entire time while losing some of the best players Atletico have ever enjoyed. And that deserves credit. because that's hard. That's not just player acquisition. That's not just talent spotting. That's stabilising a dressing room. That's getting the right characters and the right mentality. Of course, Simeone has a part to play in that too. The tactics, everything. But you got to sign good players. You got to sign the right players, good-minded people in order to do that. What helps is he does seem to have an association with Jorge Mendes, which helps anyone. When the chips are down, you just call your old pal George. Anyway, let's look at some of the transfers. I've got 2 columns. I've got good and bad. Actually, I've got a third one, which is 2 question marks. But there's only 2 players in there, so don't worry about that. Let's go through some of the good stuff first. 2017 was his first season as a sporting director. So 4 years previous, he was a scout or a technical director or whatever other term you want to throw at it. He signed Diego Costa back to the club.
Not a good one.
He likes this kind of player. I think the lesson I'm taking from this is he likes this kind of player, and I'm going to bring that back in 25 minutes' time when we talk about what he needs to be doing with Arsenal this summer, because they have a striking situation. But Costa back to the club. 2018, Rodri, 20 million euros.
Nice one.
Hello. Not bad. Not bad at all. Did also sign Thomas Lemar for 72 million euros, though. You can't win them all. You can't win them all. There's another thing.
A lot of people wanted Lamar at the time, though, it's worth noting.
I think he was amazing. He was amazing. Like part of that brilliant Monaco side. And that every year for the next 5 years, I've thought, this is Thomas Lamar's year.
Are we retrofitting that Thomas Lemar is no good?
No, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to say that 72 million euros on Thomas Lemar didn't quite work out. But it will lead us on to, I think, a larger point later on. And I'll just bring it in now, because in 2019 he signs Joao Felix for 127 million euros. Now the context here is he's just been given about the same amount of money for Antoine Griezmann. So it's not like he decided to take a loan out and mortgage Atletico Madrid's future and to sign Joao Felix. But in retrospect, I think we probably can say that Thomas Lemar was probably not going to be a Simeone player. And I think we said at the time, Jack, Joao Felix and Simeone is a very awkward tactical fit. This is 200 million euros on 2 players who did not suit the manager that has been there the entire time. And so, unfortunately, as good as some of this work has been, some of it hasn't quite worked. And I think it was possible to see it coming.
Is it worth pointing out that there have been a variety of moments over the last few years where it felt like Atleti and Diego Simeone were about to part ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then
definitely one in 2022.
Yeah,
it
but
felt
I
close.
think there was one about 2 years, maybe 3 years before that as well, where, it just felt like a lot of people were getting a bit fed up with how it works. And then eventually he goes on and signs that deal that obviously made him the highest paid manager in the world. So it's quick how things turn around. I get it. But it does feel like there have been these moments where Atleti fans have got a little bit frustrated at times with the style of play, and that not that they don't accept or appreciate what Simeone has done. I think that would be too much of a stretch, but actually that they were like, maybe it's time for us to look in a different direction. And if you're a sporting director trying to handle that and keep an eye on the change and who might be in charge the season afterwards. That's not an easier task as perhaps it might seem, having looked back at Simeone and been like, what do you mean? It's been there for, so long that it's almost impossible to think of the club without him. But it hasn't always been quite as locked in as that, I don't think.
Okay, I think that's fair. That's fair. Well, he has consistently signed players that do suit Simeone throughout as well. So he's kind of hedged his bets either way. Like Marcos Llorente, getting him from Real Madrid, 30 million euros, that was a masterstroke. I think the Trippier deal worked out really well, 22 million euros, and then sort of sent him back for, I think it was like 17 or something in the end. But I mean, certainly got the use out of that one. That was fine. Luis Suarez off Barca.
Unreal.
His last... The last bit of juice you could possibly squeeze out of Luis Suarez at a top 5 European League level.
Was.
I mean, they won a title.
It was amazing.
9 million euros are so shrewd. Then there's a shift, right? So post 2020, these signings start to get quite a lot cheaper for a while. Financially, there is something going on here for Atletico Madrid, no doubt about it, because Reinildo comes in for 3 million euros, and the following year, Samuel Lino comes in for 6.5. These are 2 really inspired signings. Like, pound for pound, this is really good transfer work. But it is not where they were the previous few years, where they were spending 30 to 60 million euros on players, was it?
No, absolutely not. And just quickly on the Joao Felix point, on the reading that I've done, it's been described that was very much CEO Miguel Angel Gil Martin driving that one. Maybe that's just something that you leaked to the media.
So, I mean, I will say, I'd also read that Berta went to watch Felix play and he scored a hat-trick in a Europa League game. Mm-hmm. I think it was against Frankfurt. And he was like, I fall in love with him.
Really?
So I think it was an agreement on multiple levels there.
It's also very easy to say once someone's flopped
Yeah.
that, that was the CEO or that was the sporting director. Decisions are never made at clubs by one person, and for very good reason.
Simeone would have okayed it.
Well, exactly. But also a couple of other hits. Early on in his reign, they signed Jose Jimenez for less than €1 million. Diogo Jota came through the club. Toby Alderweireld proved to be a really good addition. David Villa in his first year as well was crucial with Diego Costa to win the league.
The
then.
original Suarez, effectively.
For sure. And, the Griezmann situation, fascinating. Signing for €30 million, sold for £103 million. He probably ultimately regrets going to Barcelona, I would have thought, even though could you have turned it down? That's maybe a podcast for another time. But re-signs for £16.5 million. And that takes a lot of nerve from Griezmann to go back to a situation where he knew he was going to get so much stick. But it's undoubtedly been a good decision for the club and him. It's just unfortunate that he missed out on that 2021 league title. Just a really poor timed move.
He's got a terrible sense of timing off the pitch. On
really
the pitch,
does.
he's got a great sense of
It's
timing.
beautiful.
But so, actually, just to add a bit, obviously, Griezmann, he was cheap, but wasn't there didn't they have to pay quite a lot more? And there was, remember that contract standoff where if he hit a certain number of appearances, they were going to have
They
to
could only
pay
pay him for 45 minutes or
another
60 minutes.
It was a
ridiculous.
minutes cap until they brought the price back down with Barcelona because they didn't want to pay another 20 million. So it wasn't quite as cheap as that, but it was still pretty inspired because it was still cheap overall. I think it ended up around 30 or 40, which you'd take. You'd absolutely take.
And he was crucial to Jan Oblak coming. Apparently, lots of the club wanted Keylor Navas. Again, Keylor Navas had a great career in Europe, but Jan Oblak, when Jan Oblak has been at his best, and he has had some freakishly good seasons, Atleti have generally won the league or been very close to it.
Yeah.
So that was an amazing masterstroke as well.
Agreed. And Samu Omarodian for €6 million from my beloved Granada. 2023. He saw him play once against Atleti. He scored and he went, we're having him.
Wow.
And he took him.
The power of the one game.
It was absolutely rubbish. Also, signed Mateus Cunha. Signed Rodrigo de Paul. Likes a bad boy.
Likes a bad boy. And sells well as well. I mean, getting an obligation to buy from Wolves for £50 million, I think it was, at the time, that was a pretty good sale.
Yes, I agree. You mentioned that Diogo Jota passed through the club. It's probably the only way you can put it.
Yeah.
What happened there?
I can't remember the exact details.
I don't get it. I think he signed. It was from Paços de Ferreira, right? So it was quite a low key signing, and he went on loan, and then he left for €14 million, and then bang. Suddenly becomes one of the better forwards in the Premier League for Wolves, and then obviously for Liverpool too. But he was on the books there. He passed through. I don't think you can ever really say that he played for them. I'm not even sure if he did.
I don't think he did, having just looked at it.
But I think his biggest masterstroke here in terms of selling was he managed to sell a completely and utterly injured Lucas Hernandez to Bayern Munich for €80 million. Yeah. I mean, get me that guy as your sporting director. If you can get €80 million for Lucas Hernandez, who has one knee. I mean, what a sale.
Yeah, it was amazing. And also, I think Atleti have kind of been let down in recent years by they've changed philosophy. They've been a little bit more loose and a little bit more attacking and more easy on the eye, but they were kind of let down by the quality of their centre-backs, I would say, over the last few years. I don't think anyone's going to write any long pages in history about Felipe or Savic or Hermoso. Personally, I think they're absolutely fine. But at their best, Jose Jimenez and Lunomond this year, that's a really good duo in front of Jan Oblak. And then you look at his parting gift to Atleti, Julian Alvarez, and what a signing he's proved to be. Sorloth coming in as well, Gallagher. I think he had a really good final window there. And this is where Arsenal are at now. They need a very almost perfect window in 3 or 4 positions to then kick on and get over the line in this Premier League title race.
I agree. I think his final window, Atleti, may prove to be his best work. I think he smashed it out of the park, and it's a bit early to draw those sweeping conclusions, but again, very, very impressed with what he has done and how those players have turned out so far. All right, you've given us the hint there. Let's move this towards Arsenal because that's his new job. Forget Atletico Madrid. We can take some valuable things from it, but he looks after this now. He is the Arsenal sporting director. So I found this very interesting from The Athletic. It's from James McNicholas. He was talking about the interview process. He's written, nevertheless, there were some reservations. Several potential candidates for this job expressed concern, rightly or wrongly, that joining Arsenal simply meant playing a supporting role to Arteta. For those coming in from a culture where the sporting director had carte blanche, that was a concern. I understand that if you're a prospective sporting director, that you might be hamstrung a little bit in terms of what you want to do. This is a very high position up at a club, and ultimately you're in charge of transfers. But if you are feeling that you're playing second fiddle to the manager, that's a problem. But from Berta's perspective, it's no different to what he's just done for the last 8 years, is it?
Well, you'd have thought so. I mean, Simeone, as we've already talked about, best paid manager in the world. He's an absolute domineering force in that club. He is the primary reason why they have managed to challenge so successfully the big two in La Liga for a number of years, punch above their weight in Europe as well. So I don't think that should be a massive issue on paper. I did find it quite interesting that Arteta was involved in the interview process. You just thought maybe that would come further down the line. But then the key, or a big reason around Arsenal's success in recent years, was Edu and Arteta's relationship, and the fact that they managed to ease out these high earners that were getting on a bit and just have a few fantastic years of recruitment, whether that's Odegaard and White and then Timber and Gabriel coming in, Saliba becoming a key player as well, Rice. They have signs of magnificent players. So I think the fact that Arteta is wanting to be involved from the get-go with Berta, and hopefully their relationship, given the fact that Berta speaks fluent Spanish and I think 4 different languages as well, that can only be a good thing. And Arteta, there's a reason why Arsenal are deciding to back Arteta in this process. He has been, up until this year, there's been progression year on year. Maybe he needs a few more trophies to really signify that to the wider public. But up until this year, he hadn't really taken a backward step as Arsenal boss.
I agree. I'm just laughing at the idea that Arteta was in that interview and he just had like a very simple piece of paper with a question on it. So I've got one question for you. Say we have £60 million to spend. Would you A, buy a new striker, or B, buy a 7th centre-back? And if he answers striker, you're out. I want a 7th centre-back. I don't think we've got enough defensive depth.
Yeah, it did feel like last year in particular, maybe Arteta and Arsenal got it a little bit wrong. Edu, you're not sure whether he was already in talks with other clubs, etc. Maybe he was determined to leave, but Raheem Sterling felt like an Arteta recommended player. And look, it was late in the window. They didn't get the striker they wanted to. But Arsenal can't afford another window of not quite getting it right in forward areas. They do have phenomenal depth in defensive areas. But that Calafiori signing now doesn't look as important. Now Lewis Skelly has emerged. They can't have maybe predicted that. And maybe Lewis Skelly will move into midfield long term. Mikel Merino, I think he's had some great games as a striker, but again, hasn't maybe had the impact you'd expect as a midfielder yet. So that window last summer isn't reflected there. It doesn't look as strong as it did at the time, I think it's fair to say.
But it could look stronger in the future. Like, these players could come to life a little bit more when... quite simply, like, not as much goes wrong for Arsenal. Like, the midfielders felt pretty off balance all year, whether Odegaard is absent, which completely ruined everything, or whether he's come back and not playing at his full potential, and so there's too much strain on him. And, his absence maybe coinciding with Saka for a bit, obviously Benjamin White being injured as well. So, at certain points you're looking at the entire right-hand side there, the vaunted right-hand side of Arsenal, which is it's one of the strongest forces in the Premier League. It was all out for a spell, and, White and Saka's injuries have overlapped by 5-7 games, something like that. It does have an effect on the rest of the team, and so I think I can see what they were intending with a lot of their players. But it just unfortunately hasn't been able to pan out for them. And either with a clean bill of health, it will, or with a couple of complementary signings this summer, everyone can go to the next level, which is pretty exciting from an Arsenal perspective. I think it's actually very realistic that happens, that Odegaard comes back better, that Saka's not injured for 3 months, those sorts of things. But all of that helps Merino. All of that helps Calafiori. If you could just what's wrong? Like, he can't seem to fall down properly without seriously hurting himself. I get so scared watching him run around. That fall he had for Italy was like, I've never seen a person fall like that. And I know his injury history, and it's very concerning. I thought he was over it. He'd done a full year for Bologna, done the Euros, and I think everybody was thinking, yeah, he's cool now. But he's had a tough year. He's had a tough year with it. So, yeah, we'll have to see. But Berta is building off a very strong base here. You've kind of listed off quite a lot of them there, but in recent years, Arsenal have been going big on certain players. Declan Rice for 100 million is no small decision. You only do that because you think your squad is at a certain level where it's starting to look really good, and you are starting to look for those key upper level pieces that really elevate the rest of the squad and take you to the next level. And that's That's kind of Berta's job from here, right? Take this Arsenal squad, which is very, very good, and take it to a league-winning level, to a Champions League challenging level.
Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going... So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
I think it's time we look at some positions here. What should Berta have on the docket?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think not only have Arsenal improved up until this year in the Premier League, but reaching back-to-back Champions League quarterfinals, I think is really impressive. They hadn't done that since 2010 when they reached 3 in a row, and there was a semi-final thrown in there in the middle as well. And look, last year they drew Bayern Munich. This year they drew Real Madrid, underdogs in both of them. I probably expect them to lose to Real Madrid, but at the same time, it's a sign of progress. At the moment, as we record this, 12 points behind Liverpool, 9 games remaining. It'll be 8 by the time you listen to this, but they're on track for 76 points, which is 13 fewer than last year. And whereas Arsenal in previous years have had the feeling of, oh, it's a very young squad, it needs more time together, the average age of the squad now is 25.7, which is actually only the 9th youngest. And look, that will change this summer. Jorginho's leaving, Partey is leaving as well. And then the following year, in 2026, Trossard, Tomiyasu, Zinchenko are leaving. I wouldn't be surprised if Trossard and Zinchenko in particular left in the next 2 windows.
I think Tomiyasu might leave this summer. I think they're just really sick of him.
Yeah.
He can't play any football.
And then in 2027, this is the massive one. So not only do they need to strengthen with new players, but Saka, Saliba, Gabriel and Martinelli all out of contract in 2027. And you want to get Saka and Saliba in particular, and Gabriel, all tied down to new deals.
Poor Martinelli, though.
Well, yeah, we'll see about Martinelli. But that seems like a massive, massive priority for the club going forward. Real Madrid are constantly seeming to be sniffing around Saliba. There's no links with Saka with anyone else. There's no indication that he'd like to leave. Neither with any of these players, to be honest, except for Gabriel. There's always murmurs from Saudi Arabia. But that is a huge potential stumbling block in his immediate future. But in terms of positions, I think much of the groundwork for this summer would have already been laid by Jason Ato. There's no way that he arrives in, well, it's now the 1st of April as we record this, and you are starting afresh with who the hell are we signing this summer. I think a lot of the club's work will have already been laid. And he talked about it in the interview process, you'd imagine.
And the fact that he gets 2 months as a jump on the summer here means that's looking good. Like, it actually looks like pretty good timing here. Like, a sporting director starting in June, you've got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
You know? And so you want to start laying the groundwork. And you would expect a man of this caliber, who's held a position like this at Atletico Madrid for so long, I mean, surely he's got enough contacts here and he's got enough know-how to have already started a lot of this on his own anyway. Like, he may have been making these inroads when he was at Atletico Madrid, let alone now he's at Arsenal.
Absolutely. And in terms of positions, the obvious one, which we'll get into, is striker. I think there's a high chance they bring in either a left winger or some sort of utility forward that can play potentially as a 10, although when Yeri coming through, able to play as a 10, maybe that negates that slightly. And then I would look for a more defensively minded midfielder, which seems like it's going to be Zubamendi, although that has gone a lot quieter than it was a few months ago. And then I personally would look for a passer from deep or from central areas. I feel like Granit Xhaka hasn't really truly been replaced. And I know Declan Rice has been excellent, but I think they do lack that player, if Odegaard's not quite on it, to get the ball into the final third consistently. And that's why when they were linked with Joshua Kimmich, who I thought, oh, that's very expensive for a 30-year-old, I did think, wow, that would be awesome to see in an Arsenal side that I do think can sometimes look a little bit clunky in midfield. So someone like Angelo Stieler from Stuttgart, I think would be amazing on the left-hand side of that midfield. And then I think their defence is pretty well set, to be honest, especially if Ben White comes back at the same level that he was. They need a new backup goalkeeper because I think Neto's out of contract as well.
Neto's also rubbish.
Yes. I mean, what was he doing in that? Was it against Girona in the Champions League? That was absolutely nuts. I still haven't got over that. But the big one that they are being linked with at the moment, Sam, is a move for Victor Gyökeres, which is talked about this weekend. We're back to Victor Gyökeres.
I mean, I feel like I'm in December because it was the big talking point in December. I remember writing articles about it. I remember Sporting having important Champions League games around the time against big opposition, and everybody was eyes peeled for Victor Gyökeres. Eyes peeled on the big man because, you know, City are coming up and Arsenal were linked, and it all went very quiet. Gyökeres actually dropped out of the lineup for a bit. Jack, I don't know if you shed any light on that, but I think during it's either December or January, was he injured or something? But he sort of disappeared for a little bit. He didn't play in the playoff.
There was
it
a lot of
Conrad
theories, wasn't
Harder?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a period where Sporting were like, we're going to lose him this summer for sure. And they were like, well, it doesn't look great. And I think things like the Champions League, when they'd already, you know, been hammered in the first leg and it didn't look particularly pretty for them having to go to Dortmund, they were like, might give Conrad Harder some minutes and just see what happens. And he did okay. And then there was also this change of formation that didn't necessarily tie into what Gyökeres wanted to do. Koy Borges was trying to put his own stamp on the team. It's no surprise that Sporting have got quite a lot better since he was just like, this isn't working, and gone back to what was happening before, but with a slightly different spin on the Amorim formation. But I think that there was just a sense that Gyökeres was maybe just on the verge. Maybe he'd lost a little bit of the whole, this is worth playing for. You know, Sporting were really, really falling off. And they've had a bit of a recovery. And again, it's no coincidence that he's back in the team, back scoring goals. He did have a bit of an injury, but it felt like the injury was done before he worked his way back in the team, which felt a bit weird considering how good he'd been. But it all seems to have been sorted now. So things seem to be okay.
Yeah, that is a big shame that someone's momentum like that could be curbed so easily by effectively just like speculation. And yeah, just looking at it, he's scored 7 goals in his last 4 games with 2 assists. He's doing all right. He's back to his old tricks. Brace, goal and assist, and then a brace and an assist. The argument would always be when it's against Estoril, Casapia, Famalicão and Estrella. But the guy scores goals. Anyway, yeah, we are back to this. We are back to Gyökeres. Because it's starting to look like Isak is so expensive that it's very, very difficult to go anywhere near it. Benjamin Šeško seems like he's on the table, always on the table at 60 million euros, but people are just waiting to see if they're willing to take that plunge. Has he improved enough? Is he worth it yet? That's always the question. And Victor Osimhen is always floating around. I can't really see any other figures here moving into the frame. So it's Osimhen, Gyökeres, Isak, Šeško. I think Arsenal will sign one of these 4 players. And what I kind of wanted to link back to was Berta re-signing Diego Costa as soon as he was given the ability to do so for Atletico Madrid. But not only that, also clearly liking a certain profile of player. And Alexander Sørloth also fits this category. Not averse to signing a big, powerful, barrelling forward. All of these players have that quality, but Gyökeres is probably the most aggressively barrelling, eat you up, trample over you striker of all of these players. He really is quite incredible in terms of his physicality and his directness and his brutality at times. From what I can tell from what Berta has signed for Atletico Madrid over the last 8 years, I think Gyökeres is right up his street. And so I think this one comes straight back into view at 60, 70 million euros. It's not without its risk. But I'd probably rather do that than pay 150 for Isak, for example, if it's really starting to look very, very expensive for Isak. So striker on the table for sure this summer for Arsenal, and I think it actually finally gets done. Zubimendi may have gone quiet, but again, I read the other day that Arsenal expects to sign him. They think they have a deal in place. Backup goalkeeper has to happen. I'd love to see them sign some help in the creative number 8 stakes for Martin Odegaard. I'd also quite like to see them give Fabio Vieira a second crack at the whip. Like, it's not. Oh, Jackson just picked up his. Fabio Vieira.
I've never grabbed my mic quicker. I I think there's an option. I think there is a potential option for Porto to take that up. Now, whether they do or not, with the emergence of Rodrigo Mora.
For Vieira to sign permanently?
Yeah.
Because Arsenal had an option to bring him back in January. It was a small window, and they decided not to do it, despite, probably needing a bit of that. So I don't think there's much interest from Arteta's side in genuinely taking Fabio Vieira on, but
I'm not sure that Porto are going to activate the option, because I think that Rodrigo Mora's emergence as a number 10 and something that they can build around and behind.
Well, he's theirs for a start.
Well, yeah, I just think, so could Vieira be, I think. But I just have a funny, I think he will end up somewhere else. I don't think he's going to end up in Portugal. I think someone's going to take a gamble. I wouldn't be surprised, and I know this is obviously coming from me, but if Marco Silva is still at Fulham next year, I wouldn't be surprised. No, I don't necessarily think Fulham need another number 10, and this isn't a podcast about us, but that was the kind of deal I can see being done for Fabio Vieira, but I think they will lose money on him.
Yeah, they absolutely will, because he cost a fair bit. And if it's not Vieira, I think they should. You might want to open up that Alex Baena conversation again.
Oh, lovely conversation to have.
It is, isn't it? The wide forward. I agree with you. I think they need someone that ideally plays on the left, but can also play on the right. I had a quick look around at some names, and it's interesting. Barry Eze was one of the ones that popped straight into mind. Nico Williams, I think that probably could get renewed as interest, and we know he can play on the left, even if he does prefer to play on the right. Be nice though, wouldn't it, if you could have Saka and Nico, and if Saka was out, Nico hops onto the right hand side, and you've got him cutting onto his. I mean, that sounds pretty good. That feels like the kind of attacking depth Arsenal need if they're to be what they want to be. And then the other ones, what about Mitoma? Would cost a lot, but would cost probably not that much more than Nico Williams, and probably no more than Eze. So if you're in that conversation already,
Mitoma, a fair bit older though, fair bit older than Nico Williams. The issue which always comes back to it with Nico Williams is supposedly because obviously Athletic can't really sign players that aren't obviously Basque. They pay their players pretty massive wages because they don't really spend anything on transfers.
Well, you can't, yeah.
So Nico Williams is on a pretty sizable contract, let alone what the fee would take to sign, probably Athletic Club's most exciting young player to emerge since Ike Muniain, probably.
Yeah. And they probably have to pay more than the release clause to avoid paying the lump sum in cash. That whole weird Basque thing on release clauses, because they'll want to spread it out over 5-6 years. So they'll probably need to negotiate higher than 60 million in order to avoid the release clause in one go. So it is tough. Final name, gut reaction, because I'm also not sure.
Okay.
I say I'm also not sure. I don't know if you're not sure.
Let's see.
You look nervous though. Leroy Sané?
I don't mind it on a free.
Jack's nodding.
I really don't mind it on a free. I think he can play on the right. He can play as a 10. He can play on the left. I think he's a very useful player to have in your squad. And I know a lot of Bayern fans have been pretty frustrated with him over the last 18 months in particular. But he's had some very good patches at Bayern, particularly in the first half of seasons. He tends to fade in the spring, bizarrely. But if you're giving Leroy Sané 25 games a year, I think he could cause a lot of damage.
Yeah, I like it too. I think he's going to end up signing a new deal at Bayern. Is the kind of my gut feeling about it right now.
Although it would have to be a serious wage reduction, because I think we talked about it before, but he's on 20 million euros a year. I think that Bayern have basically said to him they're going to give him a lower wage with more incentives, basically, to do that. Well, I mean, look, he might turn that down. He might say, well, I can go as a free agent and pick up something elsewhere that will be higher than this, and it depends what his kind of priorities are. But I do like this as a fit for Arsenal, and I think under Arteta as well, who's obviously worked with him before, that'd be a quite nice one. I like that a lot more than some people seem to.
There's change coming at Bayern for sure. I mean, Thomas Müller's leaving the club this summer. I think Sané's future is obviously very uncertain. Serge Gnabry's is very uncertain as well. There's reports that Kane has a release clause from next January and then next summer as well. He's been loosely, I think,
He's also done an interview today to say he's no intention of leaving.
Exactly.
He also said you never know, and that's fine. But
exactly, that doesn't. Harry Kane's not going to go to Arsenal. Yeah. I can't see that happening whatsoever.
Never.
But it does feel like Arsenal have a huge summer coming up. Huge. Because
they're signing a new goalkeeper, Zubimendi, Gyökeres, Nico Williams, Alex Baena, and they're re-signing Saka, Gabriel Saliba and Martinelli all to new contracts.
Are they finally going to sign Joan Garcia? Like
Still
the
waiting for that one.
Espanyol goalkeeper, because this feels like it's been on the table for so long.
He's actually been sat at the airport since July.
Well, he hasn't, because he's been absolutely unbelievable, and he's basically the only reason Espanyol aren't already relegated. So we'll see.
It is a massive summer. And imagine arriving with this sort of level of pressure, because Liverpool are, by all intents and purposes, already losing Trent. Salah and Van Dijk still aren't certain. There's going to be changes because they haven't spent money last summer as well at Liverpool. Man City, you can imagine a scenario where De Bruyne leaves, where Gundogan leaves, where Bernardo Silva potentially leaves. They're going to bring in 3 or 4 more players, I would have thought as well, despite splashing big in January. Next season's title race feels very, very open. And I think Arsenal, with a few key additions and a better injury record next year, which is unlikely to be as bad as this year, I would have thought, and a few less controversial red cards or self-inflicted red cards, I think Arsenal have a very decent chance next year if they get this transfer window right. So Berta, pressure's on.
It is on. And Mikel Arteta himself has said it's going to be a big summer. So he's even got internal pressure from the man who interviewed him.
From his new boss.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's finish off by just reflecting on the sporting director role as a whole. Because I feel like probably, at least in England, like 30 years ago, it didn't really exist. 10 years ago, we were probably venerating this position to an unsustainable point. Like, I do remember when Monchi, and feel free to ignore all the recent comments I've made personally to you about Monchi and how much I love him. But at a certain point, Monchi was like, people would change their Twitter display pics to Monchi. He was seen as like a god. And I remember when Luis Campos was seen as like an actual star signing. I think we went a bit overboard. So we went from they don't exist to they are everything to where are we now?
Well, I think Luis Campos is still a bit of a star in my eyes, to be honest. I mean, that squad he's
and I love
built
Monchi, so there we go.
There we have it. I know what you mean. I don't think they should ever be front and centre of people's consciousness because ultimately, recruitment is massive. You can lose seasons on the back of poor recruitment, as we've seen. But it's still so many internal small factors and momentum shifts within games, small moments that decide big seasons. In terms of where we're at with sporting director, I thought Dan Ashworth described it really well recently. He said, I'm in the middle of a wheel and I'm attaching all the spokes of different departments together. That's how I see my job. Orta, the former Leeds sporting director, who's now at Sevilla, I think, described himself as a bin. And every agent, manager, owner come and dump their problems on him. And he has to deal with their problems and respond and realise which problems need to be dealt with first.
Orta's Leeds were a bit of a dumpster fire at the best of times, so maybe someone stuck him on the fire.
Yeah. And you look at the squad he's built at Sevilla over the last couple of years, it's not particularly pretty either. So they sort of define and represent the club's vision. They interlink the different departments. It's not just they come alive on January the 1st and June the 1st or whatever it is and start, powering up the old computer. They are constantly 24/7 working with agents, the manager, the owner, keeping everything connected and hopefully building a better squad going forward because recruitment, I get very, very into recruitment. I get quite obsessed with it.
Yes,
I think I always enjoy it more than the actual tactics of football at times and the actual games. I really get quite obsessed with it because I do think it can define an entire season if you get it wrong. I mean, look at the issues that Chelsea and Man United have created for themselves over the last, Chelsea much more recently, but Man United over the last 10 years and how much of that is down to bad recruitment. It's a big portion.
It is, absolutely. But we're talking about the man at the tip of the iceberg, aren't we? Recruitment teams are tens, if not hundreds deep in terms of scouts and analysts and all sorts of video scouts, regional scouts, people travelling over to Brazil and Argentina versus people that are, chomping through footage of the Serbian league to try and find €1 million diamonds they can flip for PSR profits. It's the tip of the iceberg, but it's the most important part because it's the relationship with the agents. It's the ability to get a deal done. It's not about necessarily knowing who a player is and knowing that, that player would be great for us. It's the ability to actually get that player. Not everyone can do it. Not everyone can pull it off. And so the guys at the top, like Berta, like Begiristain, like Monchi, like Michael Edwards, they get it done as well as having all the knowledge of these players. I think what we've learned, particularly from Arsenal and Edu, but other relationships too, and Edwards and Klopp can be an example of that. Monchi and Emery can be an example of that. Begiristain and Pep Guardiola is probably the ultimate example of this. The synergy between the sporting director and the manager has to be right. The sporting director has to understand his manager, understand the players that he likes, and he needs to be able to consistently hit on those players. And Begiristain is the biggest example of that for me. He is an absolute master of hitting home in the £60 million bracket of signings, which is not easy. You look at the amount of signings that people make across the world for about that much money, and it goes horribly wrong. But Begiristain barely ever misses, even at that level. And he knows exactly what Pep wants. He knows exactly what Pep's missing and what he might need. He almost reads his thoughts. And that combination, that synergy, is probably the most important thing. So I'd say sporting director is important. I'd say manager is still the most important role at the club, but they have to be able to combine effectively.
Absolutely. I think there also has to be an element of realism as well. You know, there's that infamous quote from Sunderland Till I Die a few years ago of, why am I looking at like Ibrahimovic on the bottom of this list? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Of course I remember that.
And it's absolutely nuts. Like you have to be realistic about who you're able to sign, because these deals are worked on for, in some cases, over a year. And sometimes, you know, a decision from a player's family member or an agent comes in, or there's a last minute trump of a deal, and you've got to be able to have backups ready to go. You've got to have your A, B, C, D, E scenario ready to go. And that's why having amazing contacts, having amazing history of completing deals is so important. And actually, Arsenal and Atleti, I think Arsenal, yes, have a bigger budget than Atleti, but Atleti have overachieved given the financial disparity in La Liga over the years. You know, Barcelona and Real Madrid, I think, get 30 million more pounds per year on TV rights alone before we even get into sponsorship,
and the salary cap,
the salary cap, etc. So there is a certain unfairness to the way La Liga is designed financially. He doesn't have that in the Premier League, although there are clubs owned by nation states, etc.
No, but hey, would you like to learn all about PSR? Because good God, do you need to know a few loopholes?
I mean, you could just
For 1 year. Then they were like, then we're going to get rid of it. All right, yeah, that's been useful. Good work from me.
Absolutely. Chelsea style, sell the women's team, you know, sell some hotels to yourself. It's absolutely bizarre what can go on.
I mean,
but I think you will enjoy the scenario
that
of
my
enjoying.
club is at the heart of this too. Part of Monchi's brilliance at Villa has been, you know, the ability, and I talk about the connections. He was able to go and find a club to do a deal for Douglas Luiz with, which would save Villa from effectively a PSR sanction. Mm-hmm. That is why he gets the big bucks, because he can do that. Not everyone else can do that. I've got a good idea. I don't know anybody. I can't call anybody. That's the role. And Berta, you'd imagine, is one of those guys. Right. That's it. Let's see if Arteta and Berta work as well as Arteta and Edu did. It was a high bar. It was a very high bar. It was good synergy.
It was. I hope he enjoys barbecues, because I did enjoy those memes of Edu flipping meat on the barbecue. So hopefully he's up for it.
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah, okay, right. Well, yeah, okay, let's finish on the barbecue note. It is, the sun is out.
Coming.
The sun is out in England. I'm sure lots of people are already having barbecues.
Absolutely.
I didn't have a single one last year.
What?
So I'm going to have double this year.
Yeah, you should.
It's to do with having a baby. It's difficult.
Okay.
It's just difficult.
Get him in the stroller and just
they're always napping. It's hard to put them in the sun, and then it's hard to have an open fire.
Fair enough. Wise.
There you go. Right, Dougie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Jack, thank you for chipping in.
Always a pleasure, Samuel.
And thank you, Rank Squad, for listening. We will see you next week.
Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.